Good to see you as always. It's good to see you as always. I feel like it's been forever since I seen you. It's been about 12 hours maybe, you know,
Yep.
something like that.
Now, Eric,
Yeah.
I want to jump into the nitty gritty. You're a former Major League Baseball player. You're hanging out with Bo Jackson, Ken Griffey Jr. What's it like yucking it up at Pinnacle Peak with Mikey, who I know semi-pro just puts himself on the same level as Bo Jackson and those guys?
Well, I guess we're all professional athletes in that respect. So, what's it like hanging out at Pinnacle Peak? I mean, it's kind of like I've extended the same lifestyle I've had since I started playing baseball. Really, I mean, my spring trainings are getting longer and longer. That's the only difference. I'm spending 6 months at Pinnacle Peak instead of 2, so I don't have to go to spring training, and we have a great time there.
I assume you never regretted retirement. And every time spring training probably rolls around, you're more than happy that when it ends, you don't have to get out on the road.
I actually, there are some things I miss about playing at that level. Obviously, competing at that level is one thing. I miss the guys. I miss the locker room. But the rest of it it's a job. I've often tell people if you really want to not have a lot of fun, turn pro at it. I mean, it's it's one of those things. If you love something, don't turn professional at it. And fortunately for me, I mean, baseball was not necessarily my love. I really wasn't a baseball player. I'm glad you put me in that context, but I was really just a pitcher. So I mean, I just kind of chucked every 5 days and saw what happened and tried to help the team. But,
When did you know that professional baseball, though, or pitching was going to be your calling? I mean, if it wasn't your passion, what was your passion? And then was it just, the opportunity that you had a skill set that led you in this direction? Or, how did you end up doing that instead of maybe something you did love?
Yeah, out of nowhere, I grew up wanting to play basketball. I mean, that was my life's dream, to play in the NBA. I had an older brother that was a very good high school player, 6'8", shooting forward. He got full rides everywhere. Got an appointment at West Point in 1970. So I'm 5 years old watching him play. And he ended up going to Penn State on a full ride for basketball. So I was just trying to follow in his footsteps, and I played a lot of basketball, but I also played all the other sports. And we can get into that stuff later, but the specialization these days is pretty tough. But so I played a lot of sports just to get better in basketball. And but it's not like when you're playing soccer or you're doing track and field or you're swimming or you're doing other sports, you're not playing basketball. You're doing a lot of pickup, and then you're playing these other sports organizationally. But the others, I think the sports translate into other sports. So what I did is, it was out of nowhere. I was already ready to go to college and play basketball. And my senior year in baseball, I went out for the team. I didn't even really pitch much my junior year. And I didn't even play baseball my freshman, sophomore year in high school. I did track and field in the spring. Again, we try to get better in basketball. So out of nowhere, I went from throwing about 80 miles an hour to 95. And I went 10-0 my senior year, and we won the state championship. And I had 2 scouts my first game, and then about 25, 30 scouts in my last game for the state championship. And next thing you know, they're going to say, they're telling me that I have a better chance at the next level in baseball than I do in basketball. And I was like, really? I don't see that, but I'll give it a shot. And they said, well, if you hurt your arm, you can always go back to playing basketball. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot. Went through a whole new recruiting process and end up signing at Wake Forest. So, and my basketball coach, ironically, played basketball at Wake Forest. So he said, put it on the list, see what you think. And I made that decision as soon as I got to the school.
Well, and Wake Forest has a hell of a basketball tradition too. Any hope of maybe playing 2 sports, or do they make it clear you're there for baseball and that's it?
Yeah, no, they asked me. Carl Tacey was the coach. He was going to retire after my freshman year. And after that, they were wanting me to play. And but my baseball coach, Skip Crater, RIP, rest in peace, Skip. He's like, no, you're here on a baseball scholarship. seasons overlap, you're going to play baseball. And he was always checking the gyms to see if I was in there, playing pickup against all the boys, and which I snuck around and played as much as I could, but he didn't want me to get hurt because he had a feeling I had a future.
I got a quick question, Mike, and you can jump into. I've got a coworker. Their kid is a big, hard-throwing lefty and is getting all sorts of interest. He's actually signed at Stanford to go there, but there's a lot of interest from the pros. What advice would you give to youngsters coming out today who have a chance to take that bite of a lot of money and probably be on the minor circuit for a while, then of course hopefully make it to this show, or an opportunity to go to college and see where the chips may fall after your college experience?
Mikey?
That's not my opinion.
No, that's a question for you, Eric. What advice?
No, yeah, it's definitely for,
Oh, I
that's
thought you were
definitely
asking
Eric. I
Mikey.
mean, like,
I
I
thought you were
wasn't
asking-
throwing the ball 95.
I
was
thought
throwing
you were
to
asking
85.
Mikey a question.
No. I was gonna let Mikey ask the next question. But
No,
for you,
well,
Eric,
yeah, I got a list of questions here, but this is something I'm interested in because, as you know, in major leagues and in college ball, if you don't go to the draft and you go to college, you have to pitch at least 3 years,
That's correct.
right? Before you get drafted. So a lot of guys will go, and even if after their junior year of college, if they get drafted and they leave, they're still going up against all these kids. You know, I had some teammates in high school that did this where they were drafted out of their senior year in like the 80th round of MLB, and they're going up against kids that are 17, 18 years old coming from Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, that have done nothing but play baseball.
That's true. The big thing about the free agent draft is that organizations want to get you as early as they can. So if they feel like you have potential and you're 18 years old, they want to get you through their system. Go to rookie ball, A ball, double A, triple A, and work their way through their system. So your bargaining power is the fact that if you're that good, you're going to have a full ride D1 somewhere, and you're going to get an education. So that's your bargaining chip. After your junior year, you still have a bargaining chip, and which is you're 1 year away from getting a degree, hopefully, and and you're still still young enough where they want to get you young, but they've also had 3 years of development through college programs, and the college programs have gotten substantially better. Used to be about 2/3 of guys signed out of high school, and now I believe I don't know about today, but recently it's been about 1/3 of guys signed out of high school. Most of the guys are coming out of college because the college programs are a lot better. But you have that bargaining chip. You're 1 year away, and I know that's what I did. I signed up for my junior year, and it helps your signing bonus a little bit. Now, the signing bonus is a lot different than when I signed, but it was that was your bargaining chip, and then you feel like you can negotiate that last year of college in your contract, which was something that I did, and which I haven't used yet, but fortunately I haven't had to. But regardless, it was in the contract, still in the contract, and so then they get you, and I was fortunate enough to start in double A, because when you go to 3 years of college at Division I level, you can kind of develop a little bit and don't have to start at the beginning. So that worked out really well for me, and it works out well for a lot of juniors.
How do you think your career? Do you think your career would have been different had you gone from high school to the pros?
I don't know. You never know in terms of what organization. I was drafted by Montreal out of high school. Even though my dad told, don't even waste a draft pick, I'm not even considering. I went to a private boarding school in New Jersey where I wasn't even considering not going to college. There was no chance. And it was kind of funny when they came over and negotiated. These three executives, Eddie Lopat and Jim Fanning, and these guys came in our living room. And my baseball coach, rest his soul, he came all the way up from Hightstown, New Jersey, hour and a half to sit in the meetings. And my dad was in the coffee business, so my mom was serving them coffee, and we were sitting there having little talks and small talk. And then they all opened up their book and they said, "We are prepared to offer you first round money." being in the 7th round at that time. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And my dad goes, well, what does that entitle? He goes, well, that's about $100,000. He goes, well, considering what I sacrificed to send my son to a private boarding school and the education he is able to potentially get, and how it's benefited me graduating from Purdue, I would say we would start at 7 figures. And they just closed the books and said, boy, this is really good coffee. So that was the whole negotiation. So then we had some more small talk and they were on their way. So that was, I had no chance of signing out of high school, but going back to your question, there's no way you know how that plays out, because you go from college where they might abuse you. One reason why I didn't go to some of those big schools that played big schedules they really wanted to win. I wanted to play against good competition. As a pitcher, in the ACC at Wake Forest, we didn't have a great team. We were kind of like in the middle of the pack, maybe towards the back end of the pack at that time. And but I was pitching against the Clemsons and the Georgia Techs and the Miamis and the Florida States basically every time out. So I got beat around a lot in college my first year, even though I started as the #1 starter right as a freshman, and that's kind of where we were at. But I think that was good growing pains. When you go to a minor league situation, they're going to coddle you a little more, but you're going to have a lot longer season. You're going to have a lot more throws in there. So it's really no way to tell whether you're going to get hurt or how you're going to develop. Going back to Montreal, that first rounder that year in 1983 was a good friend of mine, Brian Holman. And it was kind of interesting. He signed out of high school, and he was in the famous Mark Langston trade for Randy Johnson, Brian Holman, and Gene Harris.
Wow.
To Seattle. And that's how Randy Johnson and Brian Holman, one pitch away from a perfect game, by the way, and Gene Harris. And the funny story about that is that we really wanted Brian Holman as a polished pitcher. He went through all those years in rookie ball and A ball and double A, and we all met in the same spot in 1989, early in 1989, in the big leagues on the same team. So it was kind of ironic, but but it was really amazing to me that that going back to sorry, I lost my train of thought. Going back to that trade, we weren't going to make that trade unless we took Randy. That was what I heard from from the scouts that I knew, the guys I played with that are now scouts in the Mariners, and but they wanted a player to be named later, which ironically was he was the best man in my wedding, and he was the first rounder for the Mariners in 1985 from Hawaii, Mike Campbell. So he was the player to be named later in the Mark Langston trade. That's how we got Randy and Brian Holman and Gene Harris, and it was a great trade for us, actually.
So take us through that a little bit, because I was going to ask you some more questions about you getting recruited to Wake Forest, because as you said, your brother was recruited by Bobby Knight when he was at West Point, and Bobby Knight's assistant coach at that time was Mike Krzyzewski.
That's correct.
The great, right? And I know that there's a story behind that. I don't even know if you want to tell it on here about your dad and Bobby Knight getting into it a little bit with that deal. But I remember when
I got to hear this.
Bobby was, Erik can tell it, but there's a whole story behind that I think we can touch upon, which as we know, you have so many untold stories that not a lot of people know about. So, I mean, do you want to even touch on that a little bit, or?
Well, I can tell you that, in 1970, Bobby Knight was at West Point. My brother got an appointment at West Point. He was a very bright individual, did very well in SATs and all that. And not to get into specifics, but it was at the height of the Vietnam War. And my parents were like kind of intrigued at that time, going, well, if he takes the appointment during the Vietnam War, when you're at West Point, you can't go to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And at 1970 to potentially 1974, maybe the war would be over by then. And my parents were a little worried about it. Fortunately, my brother had a fairly high draft number, so he wasn't too concerned. But on the recruiting trip to West Point, he runs in. My parents started talking to this graduate assistant who just graduated in 1969, and it was his first year being a graduate assistant for Bobby Knight, and his name is Mike Krzyzewski.
Wow.
And Mike Krzyzewski said to my mom, quote unquote, at least the way she described it, was, unless you want to become part of the military, unless your son wants to become part of the military more than anything in the world, don't come here. And I'm not sure my brother was involved, wanted to be involved in the military that way. My dad was in World War II and Korea, so it was he fought for our freedom. So that was something that was instilled in all of us. But going back to that time, and I'm 5 years old, so I wasn't really there. Everything that I hear was what my mom and dad have told me. But when it was in 1970, when he's already made a decision to go to Penn State, go to Rec Hall and play basketball for Penn State. Bobby Knight was in town and called the house and said, I'm 10 minutes away. I'm coming over. I want to talk to Bob. And she goes, well, Coach, you don't have to do that, Mr. Knight. He's already made his decision. He goes, I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hangs up the phone. Well, he shows up. I evidently were cordial and everything. My brother's sitting there on the couch, and Bobby was talking to him and trying to convince him about how great it would be to come to come to Army and West Point. And next thing you know, after he couldn't convince him, he grabbed my brother by the shirt around the neck and started yelling at him with the veins popping out of his neck, evidently, saying that you're making a big mistake. And my dad had to, for all intents and purposes, escort him out of the house at that point. So it was quite an ordeal. Even to this day, when I asked Bobby about it, he kind of poo-poos it, but he goes, "Yeah, that's kind of what happened." So it was interesting story in that respect. But
so take us. So you're, with that, like obviously there was some interest. I think you were telling me like there was some interest from Krzyzewski wanting to get you to come and potentially play at Duke.
Well, that's true. And so back in 1983, I was the one thing that I could do is shoot. And I was a guard at 6'6", and I had a really good senior year and everything was going well. And it was funny because the only teams in the Northeast that recruited me were small schools and a couple Ivy League schools like Columbia. But all the Big East teams had no interest. But the ACC, for some reason, had interest because they had the first year. This was the year that NC State won the national title in the pit, 1983. They experimented with a three-point line, and that three-point line was 19 feet round, which is 9 inches in front of the top of the circle. Well, that was literally a joke. I mean, it'd be a joke today, even much more so. I think the guys today are even better shooters. But that was where I conjured some interest in the ACC, especially since my basketball coach played basketball at Wake Forest. So all those things kind of came together. The first person that I got letters from was Jimmy V. But we had a guy on Rutgers Prep. He was a year ahead of me. He was a 6'9" point guard. His name was Dinky Proctor, and Dinky went to NC State. Was on that NC State championship team, and it was kind of interesting because my senior year we would turn on the TV, and when NC State got on a big game, we saw Dinky come into the game and he blew out his knee so bad that in that time he really never played again. And it was sad because a freshman, he had what they called Magic Johnson type skills as a 6'9" point guard. Great passer, great vision, wonderful handler of the ball. not super athletic, kind of like Magic, wasn't super athletic, but somehow was able to drive the lanes and was smooth. It was decent mid-range jump shooter. He wasn't a 3-point type guy, but he was a great passer, great handler of the ball. So I had a game against Rutgers Prep my junior year that was really good. So they basically just kind of put me on that list to follow for my senior year. And the catch was that I was really late in developing. Like my junior year, I was 6'2", and I played, but I wasn't even. Same thing in baseball. In baseball, I was a mediocre player. I played third base. I threw about 80 miles an hour. It was. But when my senior year came around, it was like this big jump, and then more potential for my next year. So the whole deal was, if I would go back in what they call post-grad at Petty for a 5th year, take a lot of AP courses, advanced placement into college, that's when I would have a chance to play in the ACC, because they were wanting to see if you're going to have that much improvement in 1 year with more upside. Let's see where you go to the next year, and then I'd be able to do that. So that I was really intrigued, and it was really part of, like, everything was going towards my goal of playing D1 as a 6'6" 2 guard, and then see what happens, see if I can play myself to the next level and go all in on that. But then baseball came out of nowhere, and it was just crazy.
Yeah, your third base career sounds like mine. Play third base, throw 80 miles an hour, can't get anybody out. Like, I could get people out, but it was like I had a lot of movement. It was kind of like a Greg Maddux type picture, just from the opposite side, and whatever you want to call it. I can see the look on JV's
Greg
face. He
Maddux
doesn't even know.
outs.
JV doesn't even think baseball's a sport.
It's interesting. I didn't pitch much. I probably pitched 3 or 4 games my whole junior year. And because we had a senior that actually, Brian Meyer, who went to Rollins on a full scholarship for baseball, and then played the big leagues for the Houston Astros. So we had a pitcher on our team that he was a senior. He was a PG, but he was a senior, and he pitched all the big games. In high school, you play 2 games a week, so it's not like you need a lot of pitchers.
Yeah, that's true. So now that we have that story, let's fast forward a little bit. So you get done with Wake Forest, you get drafted, you go into the minors, and who else is there but probably the greatest athlete of all time, Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
And I know in your career you faced Bo Jackson. I mean, you played with Griffey, you played with Randy Johnson, you played with Edgar Martinez, who is arguably one of the greatest hitters of all time. Take us kind of through, like, your deal with Bo, and then your experiences with him in the minors, as I've heard these stories. But a lot of people kind of, I don't want to say forget, they just don't know, because everyone talks about Bo Jackson's injury and they don't talk about what he did in the minors. Nobody saw it. So kind of take us through when you went with him in the minors, went against him, and then you faced him in the bigs.
Bo is an incredible story. I mean, people who when they do a 30 for 30 on you, and they're usually like hour shows, I believe. I think maybe they're half hour. That's why they're 30.
I think they're an hour.
They're an hour. But regardless, with Bo, it was longer. I mean, here's a guy who had his career shortened because of a freak injury that he could have only created, really, ripping his own leg out of his socket.
Happens.
Supposedly they had like 200 hours of testimonials they had to cut out. I mean, that's how amazing this guy was. He's what, there's guys, Michael Jordans and those type of guys that are generational athletes. What I call Bo, I call him a centennial athlete. I call him 1 in 100 years. He's somebody like that. He was so explosive, so strong. He had talent. It wasn't just he had skills. There's a difference between athleticism and skills, and he had both. I mean, the things he could do physically were obviously off the charts. But when I got this is kind of funny, and Mikey's heard the story before.
I love this story.
But when I get to Chattanooga, I'm there for probably a week, and it's funny. The first game, the lights went out. We had a bench clearing brawl. which I cut the top of my foot because the guy spiked me in the brawl. I'm like, what am I going out here and brawling for? I just got here, my first game. But anyway, the second or third series, we had the Memphis Chicks come in, 1986. And of course, I show up at the ballpark as usual at 2:00 in the afternoon for a 7:00 game, and there's like 3 ESPN trucks, with the trucks around with the big towers, the big cell towers sticking out the top. And Engel Stadium holds about 15,000 people, and we were getting probably 4,000 a night. Well, there's already people milling around the ballpark, and I'm like, what is going on here? Well, the Memphis Chicks had just signed Bo, and he's in town for his first game. I'm like, wow, that's why this is gonna be crazy. This is gonna be a shit show, right? And it was. I couldn't believe the crowd started filling up. We had a really veteran team. The guys, when I say veteran in AA, when you're 26, 27 years old and still milling around the minor leagues, you're a veteran team. I felt like I was like a child amongst men when I first walked in the clubhouse, and they treated me as such. So, and deservedly so. That's what rookies get. But regardless, I get it. I go right straight to AA, and here's Bo, and I'm watching BP for. We've already been home for at least 4 days, maybe 8 days, whatever it is, and nobody hits a home run at Engel Stadium with our mush balls. These hand down mush balls that if you know, it's 401 down the line, it's 440 to dead left center, and it's 471 to left with a 22-foot wall.
Sounds like
Chip
a
shot.
driving range.
Chip shot.
It is
Knock down 7
Yeah,
iron.
you could. Yeah, I might be able to get like a wedge over the wall. But as far as taking BP, I mean, we had guys, Edgar, and guys named Brick Smith, who actually played at Wake Forest before I did. Big 6'5" power hitter. Nobody hits the ball even off the wall. I mean, it was amazing. These balls don't travel. And plus, it's not only that, it takes about a 450-foot shot to dead left field to clear the fence. So so I've been there for a little while, and all of a sudden we finish BP, and then here comes Bo, and he's got an entourage, cameras around him, people around him, and he's just ripping through his jersey. Back then they wore pants tight. It's like Lululemon. And you can see the veins in the legs of his
Like
pants.
JB, like JB on a Sunday in yoga.
That's
Yeah,
right. Baby.
exactly. So I was like, wow, that's a different looking specimen from what we're used to looking at. But anyway, so he starts getting in his round of BP, and he's just kind of getting loose, and there's cameras all around the screen, and now they're starting to let people in. And all our veteran team, decided what they did all the time ritually. As soon as BP is over, they're in the clubhouse, they're playing cards, they're getting changed, they're having some fruit, whatever. And well, I happened to stick out and watch from the dugout what Bo was doing, and all of a sudden he started launching balls. Not only launching balls out of the ballpark, but across the street, hitting the gas station.
Jesus.
And then he would hit one over the 471 mark in dead center, which has only been done once in the history of the stadium. And at that time, it was the third oldest stadium in the country, to Comiskey Park and Fenway Park. Or it was something like that, or maybe Wrigley too, or it was in between Wrigley and Fenway. But regardless, it was an old ballpark, and the street ran. That's where the wall ran parallel with the street. That's why it went straight out in left field. And I came inside, and I was just amazed. I'm like, this is unbelievable. The ball looked like a golf ball. It was taking off and getting small quick, especially when you're standing in the first base dugout, or sitting outside the first base dugout watching the ball take off, and you're like, wow. So I go in the clubhouse and I tell all these guys, Bo is hitting the ball not only out of the ballpark with these balls, same balls, but he's hitting the gas station. He hit one over the Coke bottle in center field, the 471 mark, and they just said, bullshit, rookie. There's no freaking way that anybody is doing that. Well, one of the guys who was throwing a bullpen out in right field, a guy named Paul Schneider, played at Michigan State. He's been a veteran, probably been 3 or 4 years in A ball and double A, and not a prospect. But he comes running in and goes, Bo is just launching balls in his 3rd round of BP all over the place. I mean, way over the wall everywhere. Right field, left field, right center, dead center. And they were like, really? They didn't believe me, but they believed Paul.
You got to believe the veteran.
So some guys were like, wow. And then, some people in the media would come in and were saying that stuff. And they were like, oh, okay. So the next day it completely changed. We finished BP. Those guys sprinted into the clubhouse, got a quick change in shirts, forget the cards, forget the fruit, came right back out and watched. And in the minor leagues, you play 4-game series. Those last three games of the series, they watched Bo Jackson, the whole team, and they were their jaws were on the ground. It was unbelievable.
That is insane. I mean, when you look at like even just hitting a regular ball, 4.7. I mean, even these guys now, that are hitting, regular baseballs, or they'll hit a home run, 500 feet or whatever, and ESPN is just all over it, right? And like, oh my God, that traveled 500 feet. Bo Jackson is doing that plus some with a mush ball.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I told you, Mike, too, the other day. So we're in the first base dugout, right? And Bo was taking a lead at first, and a guy hits a ground ball to short. So he takes off and is going to go break up the double play. Well, his feet digging through the turf and accelerated clumps of dirt went into our dugout, which is about 40 feet away, 25 feet to the dugout, 25 feet to the dugout, probably 30 feet away, clumps of dirt from where he took off. And we all like, what just hit us? That just came from Bo's spikes. And you can see the ground where he took off. He just ripped right through the ground. It was like, that is explosive. And we've never seen that before.
So did you face Bo Jackson?
Oh, yeah. I faced him, not in that series. I did face him a little bit later on in the year in Memphis. And I think that's part of the overall statistics, but I believe the statistics were, including the big leagues, he hit 4 home runs off me. Pretty much the only 4 times he put the ball in play. Otherwise, he struck out. And
he was ahead of his time.
2 of the 4 home runs were broken bat. One of the bats was off the end of the bat, and it went down. He just kind of hooked it down the line. And the other one, I jam shotted him in Kansas City, where it was a big ballpark, and I kind of ran a fastball in on him, and he hit it just maybe above the label, and the bat head went flying out to Omar Vizquel on the turf. This is when Kauffman Stadium was a turf, and went all the way out to shortstop, and the ball went out of the ballpark, and everyone was like, "What just happened?"
You're telling stories. It's like you could have written the movie about The Natural.
You don't, yeah, you don't see things like that, and that's why I call him a centennial athlete. I mean, he could, jump out of the gym. He could also throw the ball over 100 miles an hour. People don't realize that. People do not realize. Put it this way: on the scouting reports, everyone hears about the 5 tools, right? And it's hitting for average, power, speed, and throwing, defensive ability, and throwing whatever it is. And I'm not a scout, I don't really know, but they rate you from basically from 1 to 8, 5 being major league average, 6 being a very, very good player, 7 being Hall of Fame, and 8 they just don't give out. They just don't give out. Willie Mays, Mickey Mantle, nobody. They just don't give out 8s. Well, 3 out of the 5 categories, Bo Jackson got 8s.
Jesus.
He's the only person ever to get 8s on his scoring in speed, power, and arm strength. And the rest of the other 2 categories, he was gifted athletically. His routes probably as an outfielder weren't the best. And that's why, he made up for it with his speed Like the difference between him and Ken Griffey Jr. Ken Griffey Jr. could make a really hard play look easy. He's the best center fielder I've ever seen. And that's another whole funny story. In 1987, when we were in instructional league, and I watched Ken Griffey Jr. for 6 weeks as a 17-year-old with all the college kids, Tino Martinez and all these guys. I'm like, this guy is different. So I get home in New Jersey with my dad. My dad grew up in Detroit and was a big Tigers fan. And I go, Dad, who's the best player you've ever seen? And he goes, He goes, Willie Mays. Willie Mays is the best player I ever saw. You know, basically hands down from top to bottom, every part he goes. I said, well, you know what? Mariners just signed the next Willie Mays. And he's like, really? I said, I'm telling you, this guy is unbelievable. Ken Griffey Jr. was the most amazing center fielder I ever saw. And obviously we know what he could do with the bat. It's and clutch.
Well,
but Bo could make up for not great routes and make some spectacular plays.
So
there
was
was the guy outside of Bo Jackson that when you look at that era, you got Griffey, you've got Bo Jackson. Obviously, I was a huge Oakland A's fan, so Jose Canseco was my guy. And then Barry Bonds shows up a little later, Mark McGwire. Out of the kind of the rock star players, late 80s, early 90s, who was a guy that you maybe thought was underrated and one that was overrated?
Oh, out of all that, I don't know. I couldn't sell out anybody that's overrated. I mean,
Ichiro is overrated.
Well, I never played against him, but I do know that people would tell me that were in the media, that were in scouts, that they thought Ichiro was the most unproductive superstar in history.
Well, chicks in the media, they dig the long ball, right? And Ichiro was.
Yeah, and he could hit home runs in BP. He just chose not to. And for a leadoff hitter, he didn't see a lot of pitches, I guess. I didn't really watch a lot of them. I saw what he did a little bit. But when you say superstar, you're putting somebody a Hall of Fame class, but he's a different type of Hall of Fame. He was a singles hitter. He was a very good outfielder. He had a good arm. He played hard. But as far as like when you compare him to like what Barry Bonds, who's not in the Hall of Fame, but regardless, the guys who put up those big Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and Ken Griffey Jr. and all those guys who put up those type of numbers, he's a different type of Hall of Famer. So it was so they called him the most unproductive superstar that they saw.
So you brought up Barry Bonds.
That's not in my era. My era was I thought the American League had just unbelievable talent. Frank Thomas would be like 5th or 6th on the first base voting list for the All-Star game team. I mean, when Rafael Palmeiro and Mark McGwire and even Jim Thome moved over there, and then prior to that,
Wally Joyner, right?
Don Mattingly, Wally Joyner, Will Clark.
Oh, the thrill!
Will the Thrill,
yeah.
Kevin Mitchell. I mean, for me as a kid, that's to me prime baseball, right? Everybody probably gets enamored.
Mo Vaughn was MVP in '95.
Good old Mo.
And he made the All-Star team. He was MVP, but it was like
Albert Bell.
Where does that put? Albert was DH mostly and played a little left field, but regardless, where does that put a Hall of Famer like Frank Thomas? It's unbelievable. JT Snow was with Anaheim before he went over. They had it and that's just first base. The outfield was crazy. And it showed in the All-Star game where the American League won virtually every year, with the exception of '95 when Conine hit a home run in the bottom of the 9th inning or whatever it was. But and they beat us 3-2. I happened to be warming up to go into that game, but if it went extra innings,
that was 1995. You were on the All-Star team. You were with the Red Sox that year with with Roger Clemens, weren't you?
Oh yeah, the Rocket, man, another good friend and an unbelievable great player. It's a shame that what happened. He's not in the Hall of Fame. I do believe he will get in there at some point. He was probably the best, most dominant pitcher. Him and Randy of that whole era. The statistics play that out. I mean, he started two games where he punched out 20, and they were I think they were, let me see, 10 years apart, and it's amazing. His career rivals Nolan in a lot of respects, better in other respects. I mean, he won MVP, won 7 Cy Youngs. Nolan had 7 no-hitters. Roger didn't have a no-hitter, which is crazy. I mean, it's almost like a hole-in-one. I understand Ben Hogan never had a hole-in-one in competition. I mean, one of the best ball strikers ever. And then, you got some schlep 15 handicapper that has like 8 of them. It's like, really?
So one last question before, we'll talk about baseball, then we'll switch over to a little bit of golf here, the most manly sport on the planet. But 1995, you're pitching for the Red Sox. Right. My first MLB game I went to was 1995 at Fenway Park. Roger Clemens pitching against the Tigers. Didn't know that you were on the bench.
You didn't ask for Erik's autograph?
I did not ask for Erik's autograph. I couldn't get close enough. Roger Clemens lost that game. I think it was 2-1 or 3-1 or something. But Erik was telling me this story a number of years ago, and I'm like, dude, I think that was my first ever MLB game going there, and Erik is on the bench not pitching that night, and I'm going, and look at where we are years later. Best of friends.
Amazing. How much golf have we played together?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so much golf.
So your question?
No, so my question was around, I mean, you've been around, I mean, like so many guys, and especially, like when we're talking about Ken Griffey Jr. And you said Ken Griffey Jr., was like basically the Michael Jordan of baseball, in terms of his hitting abilities, his eyes, his hands, everything. The only problem was for media coverage is that he was in Seattle. But I remember you told me a story a number of years ago about his hitting ability when he was down in the cages and they had the pitching machine that came out blind.
Yeah, that was a great, that was actually at Dave Henderson's ballpark. Another Mariner, rest in peace, Hendu.
Hendu, baby. Oakland A too, don't forget it.
Yes.
Oh my God. Get over Oakland.
And Red Sox, but he was the original Mariner. Anyway, he opened up when he retired. He opened up a ball called Hendu's ball yard. It was kind of like a big industrial park where he opened up batting cages in a bar. So the dads can come there and have a few beers and then put their kids on the pitching machines and get some instruction. He had instructors there. So this is where we would work out in Seattle. It's in Bellevue, actually. And we would work out, and it would be Dan Wilson and Bill Hasselman and Jay Buhner and Dan and Bill Kruger and myself and Jeff Nelson and Edgar Martinez. We'd all be working out there for months, December, January. And it was unbelievable, how it was great that we could do that, because you could go down to the Kingdome and work out. So we would throw in the park, long toss in the parking lot, and there was a couple catchers there where us pitchers could get our bullpens in, and then those guys could take BP off the machines. Well, Hendu liked to talk a lot of crap, right? He liked to talk shit. So
love that.
He had the lighting inside wasn't that great. He had the thick netting everywhere, and he had these iron mic machines that that you can see the arm. You can barely see the arm coming because you're hitting into like a double net, and there's a little hole where the ball comes flying out of, and it's only little league distance, so it's only 45 feet away. And so these guys had been practicing hitting off a tee, taking BP, throwing each other for a couple, 6 weeks, 2 months. It's probably a couple weeks before spring training. And Hindu starts talking crap about, well, if I crank up that machine, you guys wouldn't even be able to touch it. He goes, I could hit the cheese. Hindu is like, I could hit the cheese. And so he cranks it up, and Jay Buhner gets in there, and this thing is coming in at 90 miles an hour, but from 45 feet, and you can't anticipate when the ball is going to come through that hole, through the net. It's like a little square about the size of our computers. And this ball would come through, and it would hit the tarp, and Buhner wouldn't even get the ball, the bat off his shoulder, and he would just go like, there's no freaking way. I mean, it is just, it's equivalent to like throwing 110. So you can add basically 90, you could add 20 to it because it's at 45 feet. Plus you can't really anticipate when it's coming. And, it's going to be a strike, but the balls are never going to be in the exact same part of the strike zone. So you can't just like swing in an area and guess. So you have to kind of see it and swing at it. And after about 6 or 7 swing and misses, no chance. After the ball's hitting the tarp. Well, Hindu's talking crap about, you call yourself a big leaguer. So he gets Edgar in there. Like you said earlier, Mike, one of the best hitters of all time.
The best hitters of all time.
And Edgar couldn't touch it for a number of pitches. It was just by him. And finally, foul tip went off. And it's like, you made contact. And he thought that was great, making contact. Well, we had a little guest workout guy. He didn't really work out that day. Was Ken Griffey. So Griff was there that day, and he's egging Hindu on, and that's probably why Hindu came up with this. Talking some crap. And Griff loves to give the needle too. He's great. He's great at that. So he's talking crap to Jay. He's talking crap to Edgar. And they say, come on, Griff, let's see you get in there. He goes, I haven't touched a bat since, October 3rd. There's no way I'm getting in there. So they pressured him, and they started talking some trash. So Griff says, hey, all right, give me a damn bat. So he gets in there, he grabs a bat, and the first one hits the tarp, and he didn't even see it. He just went, D, the way he says it. And we're all just like kind of laughing at him. So the next one, the pitch is coming. He takes a swing after it hits the tarp. And everyone's laughing at him, and you can see Griff just kind of like, I got to hit this thing. I got to hit this thing. The third pitch, he swings and foul tips it straight back. We all started talking. We all started like shutting up. And I'm not saying anything. I'm just watching it. Me and Bill Kruger and Dan Wilson, who's a quiet guy, just like going, he like foul tipped that straight back. Like when you just miss it.
Close.
Next pitch, line drive, right back at the net. He drops a bat, just like dropping the mic if they had that term back then. And he shut the hell out of everyone. And Jay Buhner, this is funny. Jay Buhner turned at everyone and he just said, no fucking wonder.
Wow.
And it was just that. It was like, you're talking about the natural. That's why he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. You talk about a body of work. There was some statistic where his home runs, it was like 95% of all his home runs at some point in his career while I was still there were either to put the team ahead or tie the game.
Clutch.
Where there are some guys that will hit the grand slam when the team's up are down by 10, right? Off the long reliever, which pads their stats, right?
Right. Matt Stafford, baseball.
You do that all the way through the season. Through the season on blowout games, whether you're up or down, it doesn't factor into the result of the game, winning or losing, but it helps your stats, your body of work. And Griffey's body of work was pertinent. I mean, he like I've told Mike before, if he played New York, I think he would have been replaced the Statue of Liberty.
Eric? Is that
I saw him lay out on turf and into walls at least 50 times, and I never saw him drop the ball.
That's incredible.
Or even if
I've
he
never
plays
saw
today
him drop the ball.
with social media. Unfortunately, back then, you were forced into, you had to be in New York or LA, Chicago to get the the big press. How disappointing was it? And was that Seattle team maybe one of the best teams that never did cash in a World Series ring?
The Seattle team of like say 2001 when they won 116 games, maybe. Yeah, and they had unbelievable talent we had good drafts in the 80s because we sucked so bad, right? We got the first pick. That's why Griffey was first pick in the country. That's why we got Edgar Martinez. We made good trade. We made a couple good trades, made a couple bad trades, but regardless, we had a lot of talent coming in. Then they got Alex Rodriguez. They signed Edgar and Omar Vizquel as free agents. They traded for Jeff Nelson, but we had a lot of talent coming up. Unfortunately, a couple of guys like Brian Holman got hurt, and Mike Schooler, who was a second-round draft pick, got hurt, had career-ending injuries. Great stopper. But we had so much talent because we had high draft picks, and Roger Youngward, our director of scouting, was a great scout, I believe, and a great evaluator of talent. But then through the late 90s, when all this talent developed, we traded for Jay Buhner. We had all this talent in the lineup. The lineup was devastating. And when you have Randy Johnson pitching, and if Brian could have stayed healthy, whatever it was, they could have had a really good, formidable team that could have carried him. You know, we traded for Norm Charlton, and then he blew out his elbow, and then they got him back again later. But it was a lot of talent, and unfortunately, it just didn't quite work out. And when Lou came, he really changed the dynamic there. It was about winning. It was about committing to win. And Lou is a fantastic manager. Unfortunately, I only got to play for him 1 year, but I absolutely loved him. And it was unfortunate that they just never really got over the hump. And even to this day, I think they're the only team that hasn't played in the World Series.
Did you gain a lot of respect for Lou when you would come in after a game and you're getting ready to eat your meal and you take a baseball bat to the buffet line?
He didn't tip a whole lot of spreads.
Just the rice and beans, dude.
But I'll tell you what, we had a lot of guys, you know, that he didn't really like pitchers that much. We had first round draft picks that went on, like Sean Estes and Mike Hampton. Ooh. And when they came in up as rookies, and if they walked a guy, he would just turn to Lee Elliott and say, "Yeah, no, they're gone. Can't pitch for me."
Well, good thing.
So he was a no-nonsense guy. He if you went about your business and threw strikes, and you know, like, then he loved you. He loved you as a pitcher. I'm sure he loved Randy because Randy just did some amazing things for him there, and he turned out to be an unbelievable pitcher. But Lou was great to play for. He demanded respect, but he was a great guy. He had a soft heart when you talk to him in private. You know, he had some nice conversations. But I feel like I would have loved to have played for him a lot longer, but I was into my free agent year, and they had some needs, so they traded me for Bobby Ayala and Dan Wilson. You know, they let our stopper Norm Charlton got hurt in that '93 season, so I got traded in '94, and Dave Valley, he was a free agent. They weren't going to re-sign him, so they traded with Cincinnati. I went to Cincinnati for two guys that Lou coached for, who coached against, or coached. He knew them from the organization. So he got two young guys that were rookies that were making virtually minor league minimum, and I was going to be a free agent. So I was kind of a salary dump. It happened with a lot of the guys like Tino and Jeff Nelson. And in that market, you couldn't afford to keep everyone. They obviously were going to keep Griffey no matter what. He's the face of the franchise. They're going to keep Randy because he's one of the best pitchers of all time. They're going to keep Edgar because he's one of the best hitters of all time. And they're going to keep Jay. And Jay had just was a great overall player and in the Mariner Hall of Fame. So, and he was Griffey's left-hand man. I call him left-hand man because he played in right field, but to the left of Griffey.
Eric,
So
I got to know that Rob Dibble tells a great story one time. I think he was playing for Lou Piniella, and he's in the bullpen or the clubhouse eating pizza, and Lou calls for him to plunk a guy because they needed to hit somebody. He comes out not warm, hits the guy, fight breaks out. I think he goes on the DL from punching a guy in the face or something. But when it came to plunking guys, was it kind of, I know this unwritten rules of baseball, did you just know that it was your job to take a guy down, or did the manager or a player, how does that work when, as a reliever, you're called upon, especially in the American League, because you're not going to have to face the music. Who decides who makes the call when it's time to get a little vengeance out there?
Well, I don't know how it's done today, but I'm sure it's pretty similar. But in my era and even before that, it was just kind of a look. It was a look, it was usually tit for tat. If you hit our third baseman, you hit their third baseman when the situation arises, and it's just one of those things. You're protecting your hitter. It doesn't happen as much in the National League because the pitchers have to hit. It'll be interesting to see now that they're going to get rid of the pitchers hitting and go to the DH probably in both leagues when this settlement is when the new basic agreement is settled. But it was basically an understanding, and sometimes you could tell if it was an 0-2 pitch or you got hit with a curveball, you wave that off. That's no big deal. But when it was after a home run or when a team gets shellacked or there was, and usually there's some of those things go in your memory banks. We've had some where with Milwaukee, we had spring training issues with them that stemmed from the year prior. So the year prior, we had Billy Spires run into Dave Valley and tore up his knee a little bit on a home to first double play. And he slid way out of the baseline and tore up Dave Valley's knee. And that started a whole bunch of brawls. There was another big brawl about 20 minutes. You could probably see it on YouTube with Milwaukee later on that year, where even Treble Horn got slammed to the turf by Jeff Schaefer. Treble Horn's the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers, and the Brewers were no team to mess with. They have Rob Deere, they had Dave Parker, they had a lot of big guys, and Randy and I and Jeff Nelson are tall, but we're not big. It was. But we had a lot of bench clears, and then we had a bench clear with them in spring training that was stemmed from the year prior. The whole same thing. So you don't see as much now. You can't pitch in like you used to be able to. If you hit somebody, you get a warning, and the manager gets a warning, and somebody else gets hit. Next thing you know, you're both thrown out of the game, and it's like, so they've really curtailed that whole deal. From what I understand, kind of like hockey, they've gotten rid of a lot of the thugs and not as much fighting in hockey now.
Is there a guy when you were playing who either maybe showboated the most that drove you nuts, and at the same token too, or just for a reason you took more satisfaction in punching out than anybody else?
Oh boy, I don't think anybody showboated in that era more than Ricky. Ricky Henderson was
Ricky gonna Ricky.
He was
Ricky gonna Ricky, baby.
He was something else. But if you could punch out Ricky, that was pretty good. Because he had such a small strike zone, you didn't want him on first base either. So probably the best leadoff hitter of all time. I don't think you could really debate that, to be honest with you. All the home runs he hit, all the stolen bases he had.
I think it's hands down when you talk about leadoffs and Ricky, and again being an A's guy.
That's
just like your opinion, man.
But
Eric,
that's just my opinion. I think that's kind of irrefutable.
Yeah, Eric, what I know it's been kicked around, and so we don't have to talk about it too much, but we always hear the fan side of things, the baseball writer side of things. As a former player, a guy who went right through this, I'm sure there was all sorts of illegal drugs getting taken by players in clubhouses across MLB. When guys like Barry Bonds, your teammate Roger Clemens, aren't getting into the Hall of Fame, the former players, you guys in your fraternity, are you thinking, yeah, screw those guys, they cheated, they deserve what they're getting, or it's a joke, how are these guys not in here, or just what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I would say my opinion is I'm not sure if everyone in the Hall of Fame right now is clean. So I don't know why you would pick out certain people, especially the guys that arguably in our era with Roger and Barry Bonds, two of the best players, not only of all time, but definitely in our era. So it's I know the media picks that, and media has their own uh, opinions on how they were treated or what their perspective is. And then certain guys fly under the radar that might not, but it just didn't matter to them. Maybe they were nice to the media.
Jeff Bagwell. Okay.
That's why I think Roger and maybe even Barry will get in eventually with the committee. I think there's a committee of like 16 of guys, of former players and some media and other baseball representatives that make a decision. There's been other guys that have gotten in that didn't make it through the first whatever 10 or 15 years that they were eligible, but then they got in after that from this committee. So I definitely think they're all deserving. I think when you go back to Pete Rose, for sure, he's deserving to be in the Hall of Fame. Obviously, the hits leader of all time.
Agreed.
Where everything that he did on the field. I mean, there's some guys in the Hall of Fame that aren't saints. They're not.
A lot of them.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of them. I don't know the personalities of guys like Ty Cobb and stuff, but I've heard stories. And but then again, they're there. So I don't know how fair that is. How equitable that is. I mean, it's not right in my opinion, but it's their prerogative, and as long as they have the media doing it, you're going to have some disparities because they like certain people and they don't like others.
So real quick again, as we kind of wind down here. Also, I just want to throw out a stat. You had 1,175 career strikeouts.
Okay.
And if I was playing in the league, you probably would have had about 90 more than that. But I'm not going to sell you short. I'm not going to overhype it because I know you don't like the overhype. But since when you moved on from baseball and got into golf,
yeah,
and I would just say, I mean, I think you've had a pretty prestigious amateur career playing in USGA state teams, USGA four balls, US amateurs. I mean, most people could dream about having the amateur career that you had, and you started way later in life, and part of your being a pitcher really transitioned to that because one pitch at a time, think ahead. Golf, one shot at a time, think a little bit ahead of where you want to be. But you also qualified for the 2015 Senior Open out in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
So take us through, because there was an interview that you did out there where everyone's like, hey, how do you think you fare against these guys, whatever? And you're going, dude, I'm in their domain. Like, I can't even compare to these guys or this or that. And people thought maybe you should have tried to turn pro and play some golf. Tell us about your experience at the US Open, who you played with. I mean, just shine some light on people that think that they could do it and they have no chance.
Well, I had the advantage of playing a sport at that level, at the highest level. And so I can kind of get a perspective on what it takes, how sharp the pyramid is at the top of what it takes to get to that level in any sport. And I'm of the opinion that 95% of everyone that plays their sport at that level were born and not made. I think it's just innate. It's like, Elton John could play the piano the first time he walked up to it. There's certain people that have abilities that they're special abilities. And I think for most professional athletes at the highest level, they're born to be there. It was amazing. I know, and from that perspective, I know that no matter how good I got or how many amateur events I won or USGA events I played in, I'm not even close to being good enough to be a professional. The highest end professionals are so many ticks above me. And I can go out and shoot a 68 at my home course and play with some pros, you know, PGA Tour pros, even including you,
PGA,
Mike.
not semi.
Even me,
That-
even me,
that,
even
and
me.
they'll shoot about a similar round. But I know when I went to the U.S. Senior Open, those same guys will still shoot the same numbers. And I'll get to a course that I don't know with super high rough, and I'm hitting, you know, rescues and 3-woods into par 4s. I have no chance with those guys, and and my score is going to go from 68 to 78, or whatever, 68 to 76, and that's basically what happened. And you know, when they were interviewing me on, like, what's your goal for this week? You know, you're a former baseball player and you're in the senior up. What's your goal? And I know what they want me to say. They want me to say my goal is to make the cut. Well, basically 59 of the 60 exempt guys are the ones that made the cut. The only amateur that made the cut was Mike McCoy. I think he made it on the number, but he was a great amateur player, but like a Walker Cup type amateur player. You know, I started playing competitive golf when I was 35. I started playing golf when I was about 25. So even getting to a plus handicap, I'm like, these guys are way better than I could ever be. And I know it because I've seen it in another sport. I've been able to realize it. Like even when I would go down to AAA on a rehab assignment, and when I was coming up on AAA, I thought this was the best baseball I've ever seen in my life. And these are the best baseball players. But then as you have upside and you start developing, and you get to that level and you start dominating that level enough where you can get promoted to the next level, and you come back down after a number of years of playing at the highest level, you see the difference, and the difference is palatable. And everyone in AAA thinks, you know, if I'm hitting 310 in AAA, I should be in the big leagues, or have a 2.5 ERA in AAA, I should be in the big leagues. Well, the thing is that the big leagues, with that pyramid getting so sharp at the top, the weaknesses that you have get exposed. And then over time, the league adjusts to you. And if you don't adjust to the league, your numbers go straight downhill. And that's exactly what happens. There's guys who hit 300 in AAA and $150 in the big leagues because they don't see the 2-0 fastball. The pitches are just that much more dynamic. The pitches are that much more better located. And it really pans out. The difference between hitting 150 and 300 is, you're getting twice as many hits, but if you're behind the count that many more times,
Eric,
you're going to get exposed.
What was the biggest difference of those guys on tour then, or the pros, than you? Because obviously you can hit it as far, you've got all the shots, but what was the difference that took you from a 300 hitter at Pinnacle Peak playing with Mikey to a 150 hitter when you're at Del Paso or whatever at the
it's basically the short game, the ability to adjust to conditions you're not used to, right? And there's certain guys that they're comfortable when there's no crowd and stuff like that, and then when the crowd comes in, it changes their awareness, their focus ability. I've been lucky playing at baseball at the highest level that I learned. I don't have the talent that a lot of the guys do, but I'm able to get the most out of my talent because I can focus. I've learned how to focus and not get distracted. And Mikey can attest to that. He knows that I
hear it all.
But I get in my little zone, and that's how I can shoot, close to my handicap just about every time, because I'm in my little zone. And it's just the same thing that like he was touching on earlier, that that when you do play baseball, it's very similar. When you pitch, it's very similar to playing golf.
Yeah, you're the one pulling the trigger and deciding when it goes. I got to know, and we can obviously do this for hours, and hopefully, Mike, you can score a follow-up with Eric, because I got a ton more questions. But Grapefruit League or Cactus League, who's got better golf?
Oh, well, I would say that's a tough one, because you're talking Grapefruit League is spread out everywhere, all over the state of Florida, and there's a lot of good golf courses in Florida. It's different though. It's Bermuda, it's flat, a lot of water, a lot of alligators. Out here we got snakes and
Bobcats.
Scorpions and bobcats, but we have desert golf. It's more station to station golf. But I'll tell you what, as far as like variety in one specific area, like the Metro Phoenix area, because we have 15 teams all within like 45 miles of each other. There is something like 250 golf courses in that area. So you have a lot more variety here, a lot more access, a lot easier access, because there's just so many different places you can play down here. And I think the weather's better. I think you can't beat March weather in Arizona. In Florida, it could be 40 and blowing, or it can be 80 and 85 and humid.
And a lot less bugs, that's for sure.
A lot less bugs, a lot less humidity, better restaurants, better looking girls, better bars, all across.
Final question for me. Eric, how many strokes do you have to give Mikey when you guys play?
I don't have to give Mikey strokes at all. I tell you what, we've talked about this before. When we play a course that's 65, 6,700 yards, I can compete with him. When we play a course that's 70, 74, 7,500 yards, I can't. I mean, I'm going to be 57 years old, and I don't hit it. You JB, you're funny. You're like, oh yeah, you can hit it as far as them. I can't hit as far as them. Those little guys, Corey Pavin hits it farther than I do. So I try to, I try to look at my clubs, and Mike calls it 14 wedges. I used to say I carry 10 wedges. I have a 56, a 52, a 48, a 44, a 40, a 36, 32, a 28, 25, and a 21 degree wedge. So that's the way I call it.
We were playing, and just to touch on that, I mean, we were playing number 7 at Pinnacle, which now is 500 yards or whatever. Always seems like it plays into the wind, but even the one beforehand, I think it sat at 468, and you hit driver out there into the wind and kind of down the left side. And I bombed one up there. I think I had like a 8 or 9 iron in, and I hit mine to about 30 feet, missed it. And you hit 3 wood in there to about 4 feet. And I go, what club did you hit back there? And he said, I hit my 15-degree wedge. and then I'm like, really, your 15-degree wedge? And he goes, Mike, the goal of golf is to get up and down from everywhere. If you're 210 on a par 3, get up and down. If you're 300 yards, put yourself in position, get up and down. If you're hitting a wedge in from 90, get up and down. If you miss the green, get up and down. And I said, wow, that makes a lot of sense.
That's ideal. I mean, I also play golf pretty conservatively, where I try to work it, start at the fat part of the green and work it towards the corners. And if I miss it, it's just in the middle of the green.
Sounds like JB's game.
Very simple.
Gives me a chance, and you're outside 20, 25 feet, you putt it to the hole. You don't try to make it. Because if you try to make it and hit it 4 feet by, you could miss
the amazing thing
every stroke
about
counts the same.
Yeah. The amazing thing about you too, real quick before we go, is your ability to putt. I mean, you use this old Ping blade putter you've had for I don't know how long, ever since I played with you. You've had it
09
before that. But when we redid the greens about 4 or 5 years ago, and you were putting, and you go, man, I don't remember that putt breaking like that. Because every time I play with you, you'd say, hey man, like this putt's been right edge for all 20 years that I've been a member here. Like you literally had the greens memorized. And then we redid them, and you struggled for a little while. Now it seems like you have it back, where all of a sudden you're just very methodical. Then all of a sudden it's like Jordan Spieth's like, boom, 20-footer, boom, 25-footer, throw in there to 3 feet, make it, then boom, 18-footer. And you have everything memorized. And
that was the old saying when I joined here. When I joined Pinnacle Peak, it was amazing. I was always a decent putter, and the greens were so tricky, as you know, with the valley effect and the subtleties of it. I couldn't make 5-6 footers save my life. I would have to go somewhere else to get my confidence back. So the saying was, when I joined, it's like you don't learn. I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but it was at Pinnacle Peak. You don't read the greens, you memorize them. And it's basically that. I don't know why it's that way. It's seemingly that way more. Yesterday we when we play the talent course out here at Greyhawk, there is definitely a valley effect. So there's something to that grade that goes from Pinnacle Peak all the way down to the airport, that it's so subtle, but you have to factor it in on every putt. And there's been we've had a lot of pros come out that are on tour, and they subtly miss putts right one way or the other, and they're just like, wow, I didn't see that. And that's because you have to memorize those greens. When they did change the greens, you have to kind of rememorize them.
You had to, and we just had last week after the Waste Management, we had Derek Smith come out, Denny McCarthy's caddy, and he was a good player. Played main tours, played at Texas Tech, Oklahoma. I mean, he's a damn good player, and he was missing 12 footers by 3 cups.
Yeah,
and he's like, I just can't get myself to play that much break. And then when we watch, you play and you kind of memorize the greens. I mean, you're hitting a 20-foot putt, like on 13 to a front left pin, and you're right. You're hitting a 20-foot putt, and you always say, man, I played 12 feet of break there, and the ball would just drip and get dead center and just fall right in. Like, no problem. And everyone else is taking a little bit off of it, hitting a little more firm. They're running it 10 feet past, and you're like, dude, you can't putt like that. What are you doing?
No, somebody told me that it was Lauren Roberts said, I was watching him putt at Sahali one time, and every putt from 15, 20 feet, if it didn't go in, it only went a cup or so past the hole. And so I'm like asking him, I went up and talked to him about putting, the boss of the Moss. He goes, the hole gets big when it's as big as it can get when the ball is traveling at that speed, when it goes to the hole. And on top of that, no matter what, you can't miss the next one. So you take breakout, the more speed the ball goes at the hole, the smaller the hole gets. And a perfect example is when you're putting on those greens with the little holes, the ones that are about this big. Try putting that with speed that goes more than 6 inches by and making a putt. It will not go in. Mm-hmm. And so that's just that just exemplifies or exaggerates the whole thing about the size of the hole and the hole getting bigger. So if you can read the break and have a common denominator speed, if and how much break it takes to get to that speed that just dies near the hole, especially if you're, 12, 15, 18 feet, putts that are makeable, but they're still really low in the percentage range, then your chance of 3-putting are 0. And the chance of it falling in, that's why you play safe. You might have 1 or 2 or 3 of those that fall in during a round. And if you sit there and you try to make 20, 25 footers and hit it 4 or 5 feet by, you might make them all, but as Mikey knows, if you play a 72-hole event, you're exhausted.
Nightmare
fuel.
Have to
grind them out.
Nightmare fuel. And then that's when you develop what we like to call the putting yips, which then you just consult your local sports psychologist, which I always called a bartender.
Yeah, Anheuser-Busch.
Anheuser-Busch.
12-ounce pearl.
Pop off vodka, vodka lemonade, whatever you need to get over that.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's the aiming fluid, but yeah, that's just kind of the way I figured out how to putt. It's kind of like aim point. Aim point is sort of like that. I'm not going to stand over the putts and do all this stuff, and then
it's like you're
stepping back and forth on the
stepping in your own line. You look like you're trying. Yeah, plumb bob. JB's a master of the.
You taught me that, Mike. Yeah, I learned that from you.
I did.
That's all
I did teach you that. Yep, that's right. Bembo. We're the one we're at number 9. I hit the snap hook 3-wood off the telephone pole back into the middle of the fairway. Almost killed someone. 101. But like the thing I like about aim point is number 1, everyone walks in your line and then they say they don't. And then 2, when they hold their fingers up, it looks like they're trying to use the force to get the golf ball to move. Like last I checked, Luke Skywalker was a long time ago in the galaxy far, far away.
Hey, whatever works. They gave golf a 4-letter word for a reason.
That is exactly right. And there's 18 holes in golf because that's how many shots are in a fifth of scotch.
Hey, Eric,
okay, appreciate Mikey, you know that.
Appreciate you taking the time, and look forward to getting around in with you when we're down there. Hopefully Mikey's weekend of wedding festivities, maybe we'll squeeze some golf in.
God, I hope
Absolutely.
so.
I never golf
I made a
with them, so
7:30
I
tee
know
time. I made a 7:30 tee time that day so I can make the reception, the ceremony.
Probably a good
I'm
idea
still
to do that.
Maybe.
Yeah, she's throwing shit at you right now.
She is.
Erik Hanson,
yeah,
really
she's-
appreciate it. Mikey, semi-pro, dynamite as always. It's the principal. Appreciate everyone's time.